Welcome, welcome. Have a poll up and running just to see who is in the room. Thanks for those of you that have voted. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'll leave the poll up while we do some brief introductions. And just so you know, the slides will be available, but I'm holding them hostage until we get to the end. So that way you are forced to fill out my feedback form. So that way you can give me some, let me know what you're interested in, and we can get those slides to you. But don't worry, you'll get the slides by the end of today. When the session's done, I'm going to go in, do a mail merge, and bam, they'll get to you. So let's go ahead and get going. So we're going to talk about just some tips for rethinking professional development. And just so all of you know, I'm Ari Flewelling. Yes, that is my email. Yes, that is my phone number. It goes to my cell phone, literally, this little red one right here. I give it to you willingly. I give it to you openly, so feel free. And my main role is I'm an education strategist with CDW. So the way that works is I am similar to an EdTech TOSA in the sense that part of my work is informing the company about education and best practices and what is happening in the field. So what is the real truth about K-12? And then the other half of my role is working directly with schools and districts as they implement educational technology. And I really love both sides of what I do because it allows me to really kind of be that unbiased voice in the room. I'm not paid for based on sales. I'm not paid for on commission. So when you work with me, like you are literally getting, just my research-based, opinion-based experience, ideas and strategies to bring to you. And it's great because in my last district, I was a Google girl. We were all Google all the time. But now I get to integrate and work with Microsoft. I get to, work with all the different Chromebook vendors and partners. So it's super cool to be able to bring that unbiased opinion to work with you. So definitely feel free to reach out. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So we have a couple of folks in the other category. And thank you for those of you that shared what you are doing and what your role is. And then we have some other folks that are curriculum and instruction or / district admin or district or county admin. So thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting to see the different folks, just especially too seeing curriculum and instruction, just because technology PD works better when it's based in curriculum and instruction, plain and simple. So here we go. So we all know PD is important. We knew this before the pandemic. The pandemic, if anything, has shown us that it is more important now than ever. So I'm going to launch a new poll. And in this new poll, there's 2 questions. The first one, before the pandemic, click all the things that your district offered for PD. And for those of you, if you're in a county role or in your outside the district role, click all the ways you may have engaged with the school district. The second question is going to be, moving forward in a post-pandemic world, what is the one thing you'd like to see prioritized the most? So the first one, click all the things. Second one, you only get to click one. All right, so here we go. All right, thank you to the person that's voted so far. Much appreciated. Oop, we got 2. And just so you know, it just tells me people voted. I don't know who's voted. So don't worry, I'm not going to pick on you and be like, Jack, you didn't vote in the poll. So you're fine.
I did vote.
See, look, I told you it doesn't tell me who it is. And to those of you that have joined us, we're just doing a quick poll to see what type of PD was offered pre-pandemic and what would you like to see post-pandemic. And also, you will be able to get a copy of the slides at the end. You're just going to have to fill out my feedback form to be able to get to them. All right, looks like we have about half of you have voted. So I'll leave it open for just about 10 more seconds. And if you can't see the poll, it might be hanging out at the bottom. You might have to click on poll to open it. All right, we have about 8 out of 11. All right, 72%. That's a decent sample size. So we'll go ahead and end the poll just for sake of time. So now just so you can see the poll results. So of course, the most popular option pre-pandemic was that in person. I know that was something I engaged in quite a bit, whether it was district level or site level. It's interesting to see that there were some site level asynchronous. Also, when we're talking about collaboration with outside partners and COEs and other districts, I think that that's great to see too, just because it's definitely one of those better together situations. I know in San Bernardino and Riverside County, they have what they call the Technology Leadership Network. So the ed tech and IT leaders from the area meet once a trimester together. So that way they can talk through best practices and such. So things like that are always fantastic. And looking forward into what would we like to see post is, this is really interesting. So this is different than the first session. So the first session, a lot of folks wanted to see more district online asynchronous, but in this session, most of you want to see more collaboration with other districts and COEs, which I think is fantastic, just because it's one of those things where how can we pool resources? How can we pool that collective knowledge? I know when I applied for the Google Innovator Academy, my original idea of what I wanted to do was something to that effect. It's like, how can we essentially do like mini externship? So like if you have a fantastic SEL specialist and I have a fantastic ed tech specialist, how can we maybe like swap for a day or things like that? So I think the fact that county office and district collaboration popped up as a #1 is so important. And especially too, if you're with an organization that's outside of the K-12 space directly, that's so important to be able to bring that perspective and that expertise into the room. So thank you so much for participating in the poll. So when we think about this, looking at this little sample of data and also looking at, we all know PD is important. A recent study that was done and published in August, now granted, the sample size was about 800 teachers and administrators, and it was focusing on the 1920 school year. They have not done like an updated version to survey folks to see what they thought about the fall. That'd be something I'd be really interested in to see the difference. But at the time the study was published, and at the time they did the study, only 20% of teachers reported participating in some formal professional learning. Here's the problem. Administrators believed that twice as many educators participated in formal learning. That's huge, but probably not surprising to those of us in the room. I was a district level technology TOSA, and I would offer PD all the time, but since it was not mandatory, since it was not compensated, not a lot of people would show up. If you are from curriculum and instruction, you would offer lots of PD, and you probably would have more attendance just because it's mandated by the curriculum, or you've got a new curriculum adoption, you have to have it. But even still, just because it's mandated doesn't necessarily always mean that the connection between what the admins think is happening with that PD is the same thing that what the teachers think is happening. So I wanted to bring this up because when we're talking about rethinking PD, I'm going to talk about some things that you probably are already doing, or things that you might be doing pieces of. But what I want to do is I want to put them into just kind of like a framework or kind of an order of operations type thing to help really kind of demonstrate how we go through this process. Because those of us that provide PD, whether we're in district, out of district, county office, we know kind of some of these things intrinsically, but we have to make sure that as we're advocating for funding, as we're advocating for attendance, advocating for more staff, we put it in terms that are going to make sense to the people that are making decisions. And we're also aligning it to, what's going to be a way to get others involved. So for those of you from curriculum instruction, how can you talk about this in such a way that your ed tech people jump on board with you, or vice versa? So let's go ahead and show that quick cycle. So first, you want to make sure you're gathering data. And this isn't just data from your stakeholders. This is actually doing kind of a hard look at your district holistically. Next, you want to understand the breadth and depth of the offerings that you have for professional development in your district at this point. So that way you can cut through the noise of all of the varying options to make sure your stakeholders see what's most important based on your data. And then as much as humanly possible, you want to make sure that you're staying up to date. With technology, there's so many rapid changes that it's important to make sure that you have that awareness of what's going on. When we're talking about pedagogy, it's important to look at how strategies may have adapted and changed for remote and hybrid learning, how strategies we used to know and love that were maybe paper pencil based, how can we adapt those into when we go back into the classroom, because there's going to be more devices in the room than ever before. And then of course, how do you provide on-demand support? So that way, as you're going through this, the folks that are getting that PD are continually supported beyond when they're there for that synchronous or asynchronous session. Now, I am going to make one sort of blanket statement. I'm going to talk about this in regards to if you have support staff for doing PD, but I am also going to mention PD platforms, because in my personal experience, personal opinion, they can be helpful if wielded correctly. I worked in a district that didn't have a PD platform, and I worked in one that did. And when I worked in the one that did, my role, while still challenging, being one of 3 TOSAs for 42 school sites, I had support from my platform, and it was very, very helpful. And I was quite a fan. So just keeping that in mind, that I am going to make have some statements about that. But then also too, another thing to keep in mind, whether you're onboarding a platform or you're onboarding more PD staff, whatever it is your situation is making sure you're addressing whatever frameworks are appropriate based on what your district's goals are or based on your state. So for example, in California, we have the quality professional learning standards, and not a lot of people know, but they actually did do a version of those for learning from a distance. So just some things to consider. Then we're also going to talk a little bit in each section about the before the PD happens and while the PD is actually happening. So first and foremost, gathering data. Data is so stinking important. And especially for those of us in California and in leadership in California, we know data is key when it comes to our local control accountability plan. So we want to make sure that a lot of times PD is paid for out of LCAP. So how can we get data to support that? So number one, what is your district's mission and vision? What is your county's mission and vision? What are the goals? What are the initiatives? In my first ever tech TOSA role, the district's main initiative was readers are leaders. So you best believe everything I did would connect back to that concept about how am I advancing reading skills, or how am I advancing reading comprehension. Everything I did, I found a way to tie it back to that, authentically, of course. Then, of course, looking at just all the different things that your district has in regards to needs and wants. So what are their current pain points? What do they need, literally, like right now? But then also, too, thinking about how does this change from a teacher to a paraprofessional? How are you going to present the same information that they both need, because they both work with students, but shift it depending on their role, and also sometimes depending on their union. And then, you know, when you look at your data, it's depending on what questions you ask, you might be able to get some information that helps you plan beyond the immediate, which I hope you do. If you don't have a question built in to ask that, you know, what can you hypothesize based on the data that you're seeing to help you think forward? And then when you think about the staff, if you do have staff, what are your staff's pain points, right? So in that scenario where I was one of 3 in a district of 42, ranging from pre-K through adult ed, one of my pain points is I could not be on campus as much as I wanted to. I could not engage in model lessons and coaching as I wanted to because I was stuck doing so much training or doing so much professional development that I could never actually go see if it was being followed through on. So that's one of those examples where a PD platform would be revolutionary to me, because then some of that load would be put on the platform so that way I could go do the hands-on work with teachers, whether it be remoting into their Zoom or actually physically going into their classroom. So another piece of data from that study was that 82% of the educators believed that students are going to need more individualized instruction moving forward. So if this was a piece of data you got while you were collecting, this would be something important to think about moving forward. So that way, as you're addressing current state, you are building the foundation to get to this idea of more individualized instruction. Also, as you're implementing your PD, you want to know what people actually are participating in. What sessions are they going to? You know, if you've been assigning courses, are people actually completing the courses that you've assigned? What other things are people doing outside of what you want them to, or outside of what you thought they were going to do based on your data? And then if you are using, you know, district staff to do this, be careful. Just because while yes, you can use Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, you know, things to kind of collect this information, it can be really separated and sporadic. I know I personally had this issue when I was trying to track people that went to my Google Level 1 certification course, those that passed the test, those that didn't, those that were able to come to Level 2, those that passed and those that didn't, and then inviting those people that made it through Level 1 and 2 and passed the test to the trainer PD. It was a mess. Then also too, part of sometimes that issue of trying to do all that data tracking in-house is when the person that is doing that data tracking leaves the role, how is that data transferred, literally? And how are those processes transferred? Bless the heart of the girl that had to learn how I organized my data. Because I guess my data brain is a lot different than other people's. If you use a platform, however, you know, what data can you get from that platform? What is the transfer of power on that data? How can you use that data to inform the previous questions? And then, of course, how can you use that data and continue to support aligning things to your mission and vision and your goals? Quite often, we're always trying to get more support staff for professional development because we know it's needed to be able to get past the actual first step of showing people how to do the thing, but then supporting them through the doing of the thing. So, you know, whether or not professional development or your subject is outlined throughout your district's mission and vision, again, how can you align your work back to it so that way you can continue to make yourself more indispensable? So thinking about your data, it's important to understand your current state. First and foremost, when we're talking about technology, yes, there is going to be some training, which I think of as literal point and click. I want to create an assignment in Canvas. Point, click, how do I do that? Versus the more important thing, which is professional development, which is when you're integrating content, pedagogy, and technology together. This is what our teacher professional development needs to be. Because if you look throughout our standards, technology is embedded everywhere. It is unavoidable. We have to make sure that we're bringing it together so that way teachers who are the content experts and teachers who have experience with pedagogy can bring that knowledge to the forefront and learn how the technology can aid them in their practice. And figure out, you know, when we're doing our offerings from our, you know, our office, you know, what do we have that's synchronous? What do we have that's asynchronous? Do we have those different options? Of course, in the before times when it was all face-to-face, it was all synchronous. There really wasn't asynchronous. So if you couldn't come to the PD, you couldn't come to the PD. That was just plain and simple. Also, too, as you're thinking about your professional development, are you also creating and thinking about what ways you can support parents as these things shift? One of the biggest examples, of course, is when we saw the shift to Common Core math. A lot of districts had math family nights to help support this shift. So do you need to do something similar with whatever it is you're implementing with your staff that work hands-on with educators? Also, if you're thinking of onboarding or leveraging a platform, you want to make sure it does all the things I just said. But also, too, most districts are paying already for bloodborne pathogens training and all kinds of things like that. So if you onboard a platform, can it do that too? So that way, instead of paying for compliance training and then paying for, technology or curriculum training, you're paying for both. And then hopefully whatever platform you onboard has more benefits beyond just PD that you can integrate into your systems, whether it be data or other types of stuff to make your job easier. Because we want to work smarter, not harder. That's really the goal. And then when we talk about implementing it, think of it like a menu. What's going to be the things that are going to be the most important for your folks to see? How are you going to present it? Literally, you want to think about the messaging and the communication. A lot of this too is going to be important to think about as you implement, keeping in good touch with your union. Prior to leaving K-12, I was actually an EdTech TOSA, but I was on the board of our union. And it was so interesting just to see the conversations that were being had at the union level when talking about professional development. It was super useful too to also be able to hear those concerns. So that way, as we continue to develop and implement our PD program, we can make sure that we're mindful of them. So that way we can support our stakeholders. And then also too, with this idea of communicating the professional development, what timelines are expected, what expectations are expected. Does everybody have to finish this one course by a certain date? Or is it more of a free-for-all? Like, here's the stuff, do what you want. I highly advocate for some level of expectations, right? We want to make sure that not only do we know that everybody has this base level of access and has this base knowledge, but we want to make sure that our stakeholders, our educators that are participating understand upfront what is needed for them to complete their professional learning. And then of course, as you're doing this, make sure you're constantly in sync with other departments. So that way folks know what's going on. In my last district, our department for EdTech sent out a menu of our professional development options to site admins. And then there were a couple site admins that called the director of curriculum and instruction and said, "Hi, we got this great professional development menu from technology. Do you have one for curriculum and instruction?" They didn't. And that caused quite a few closed door meetings behind the scenes. So, try and sync with other departments. I hope, through the data gathering process that already starts, but definitely when you're starting to think about your plan and your implementation of your PD, sync with those other people. Because again, you want content, pedagogy, and technology woven together to get the most bang for your buck. All right. Oops. And then thank you for the comment about talking about that connection. If you thought that connection was a good analogy, hopefully this one will be good too. So when we talk about cutting through the noise, I like to think about it in terms of a buffet. In the before times when we could actually go to buffets, there's kind of 4 different types of folks that engage with this type of restaurant. So there are the people that would walk up to this beautiful buffet and be paralyzed by choice. They would be staring at it forever, not quite know where to begin, not quite know what to eat, probably take a long time making a decision. Sometimes they'd just be like, "I don't even want to deal with this right now. I'm going to go to the other section where there's less," things like that, right? Or they might fall back on an old favorite and not try something new. Then you'd have the folks kind of like me. When I go to a buffet, I'm like, I want all of it. And I put it all on my plate. 2 problems with that. There's usually a lot of food waste. So if we think about it in terms of PD, there's probably a lot of time wasted. And how much do I really remember? Do I remember every single dessert I tried? Probably not. So if we're talking about PD, do I remember every single thing I learned? Probably not. And if I don't remember it, I don't implement it. And then, of course, there are those self-directed buffet goers that know exactly what they're doing. They have a plan of attack and they go for it. We have those folks. A lot of those folks sometimes are our early adopters or are site champions of a specific subject. So if you're one of those people, thank you very much. And then of course we had folks that didn't engage with the buffets at all. They were like, I'm not going to a sneeze guard cafe. So we also know that there were those folks with PD as well. They would show up begrudgingly if you forced them to, and if they didn't have to be there, they weren't there. So let's go, there we go. So you look at your data, you look at what you currently have, and then you curate. You figure out what is going to be the most important thing that people need to focus on. What is the most timely? However, you also want to make sure you're thinking about blending things in for that future state. So if teachers said they believe individualized instruction is going to be something really important in the future, as you're going through your offerings and as you're presenting PD to your teachers, make sure there's information about differentiation scattered throughout. So that way, when you do your big PD launch of individualized instruction, you can be like, remember when we talked about how you can differentiate assignments in your Wonders curriculum? We're going to build on that today. And if you forgot about that, here's the link to that asynchronous PD where you can go get a refresh, stuff like that. If you're working with a platform, what are you able to control within that platform? Can you limit what people see? Can you show them something first and foremost? So that's what they see first. And even too, when you're doing these plannings and cutting through the noise, if you're working with a platform or if you're shifting the way you do professional development, how do you mix your pre-existing content in with new content? So that way folks see what's specific to your district, what's specific to the platform, and how they blend together. And when we go into a little bit more things about that is when you're thinking about working with a platform, how do you intermix your content that is yours into that platform? Is that possible? Is that something you can do? You know, some of the things that have been the most successful in the social media space is this idea of playlists, or you bought this, you may also like this. How can you integrate that into your PD system, or how does the platform do that for you? Also, huge thing, you've made this beautiful menu. You've, curated kind of the playlist that you want people to go through. But do people know about it? Do people know where to find it? Is it easily accessible for the people that are going to engage with it? And then, of course, don't be afraid to set limits with this, right? You don't want people to overload themselves or feel like they have to do all the things at once. And then again, honoring that work that your staff has done so far. So making sure that no matter what path you move forward, anything that's been created prior to this new version of PD is included in some way, shape, or form, unless it's out of date. Speaking of keeping things up to date, you want to make sure that while you're planning for keeping things up to date, please, for the love of all that is good, empower and support your staff in getting certified in whatever it is. If there's a textbook certification, the Google certification, Microsoft, Screencastify, Flipgrid, like all these things have some level of certification. Please support your staff in doing this. It's going to be crucial. It's also important to make sure, and the reason why you want to do that is because when these trained folks are certified, it helps them gain access to different levels of information from that app or from that program. Then also too, it's important to keep in mind what is your capacity to stay up to date. So that way, right? For me, in my current role, I now live in both the Google world and the Microsoft world. I'm already a Google certified trainer. I'm good. So my capacity to stay up to date there, very high. My capacity to stay up to date with Microsoft, not as high, because I need to work on my certification. And then if you do onboard a platform, make sure the platform is certified in the things that you support. So that way seeing that Google has approved this platform for PD, then you know that it's going to be good information for your educators. Then also, if you do onboard a platform, it's important to ask, how often is the platform updated in terms of content? How often do they add new courses? When they add new courses, are they content-based? Are they pedagogy-based? Are they an integration of all three? Are they training? What is available? And then one thing that was in the chat is depending on, sometimes you're working with certain partners for content, when you look at the PD that they offer, is it sufficient? Is it enough? How do you have to supplement with that? I know for, myself and I'm watching my husband teach, a lot of the things that the textbook company has provided is PDFs. So, and, normally when you're in the classroom, you could print them, but we can't do that now. So his districts had to spend time and money in training people how to work with PDFs digitally. Also too, one thing I almost missed is there was talk about different parent information sessions in regards to the things that we're going on. So definitely think too, when you're staying up to date with your information and when you're communicating your information, make sure that if you need to communicate bits of it to your parents as well, that you do, just because, you want to make sure that all of your stakeholders know what's going on. But also at some point when you're implementing things, you have to sometimes in some small ways, let go the desire to be 100% up to date all the time, because let's face it, technology changes so fast. Sometimes it's just not feasible. So again, do your best to stay up to date. Those teachers that are certified, quite often they will have access to information the general public does not have before the general public gets it. So while they can't directly always say it to you because they're under a non-disclosure agreement, they can at the very least begin prepping and planning for when that change is open to the public. Again, focusing on what is the update frequency that's forward facing to staff, because you may have updates happening behind the scenes, but you may want to maybe wait a week or two before you push the updates to other people, especially if you are depending on your update cycle from company. So I know like Google has rapid release, and then like I don't know what the other release version is, but like let's call it normal. You don't want to push out the update of PD to people if the update isn't live in the program. And then last but not least is this idea of on-demand support. So when you're planning for it, who is on demand? Who is it? Who's going to do it? In my role as a TechTOSA, it was really difficult for me to do on-demand support. I didn't have the capacity just because there was not enough people to man the phones. So in that case, we didn't have on-demand support. The best thing we had is send us an email and we'll get back to you within 48 business hours, right? That's not very on demand. And then also to think about, what are you willing to support moving forward? Are you going to answer questions about Seesaw, or are you only going to answer questions about Microsoft? And then differentiating technology support. So whether that be like your network or your printers versus your pedagogy support, whether that's integrating technology or not. And then of course, making sure you're collaborating with others. Try to keep equity in mind as much as humanly possible. I would have some school sites that would reach out to me and want PD all the time. Like if I could live on their campus and their campus only, they would let me and they would want me to. But I supported the entire district. So how do you balance that if you're working with in-district staff? How do you separate that load so that way you can give certain sites what they want, but also make sure everybody's getting what they need? When I was in a district that had a PD platform, that helped with that so much, because I could show people this is where some points and clicks are. I could send them links to things to watch and interact with. And then it even helps supplement with some of the content and pedagogy PD. So that would kind of be like level 1, but then level 2 could be coaching with me. So then it allowed me to reallocate my time to better plan for equity across the school sites. And then again, how do you continue to optimize what you already have with new resources, whether it be a platform or not? And then as you're going through this, again, I know I've said it a bunch of times, but communication, 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 whether it's within leadership, out to your stakeholders, let people know how it's going. Let people know what's newly available. Make sure people know the email address or the phone number to call to get that support. And also to make sure that there is that clear understanding of roles by both the people that are enacting them and the people that are calling them. So bringing it back all together, thinking about this statistic that we want more individualized learning. So that's your data. Next, we're going to look at our offerings across the board to see what do we already have that is building the foundation for individualized learning and what is pushing us forward towards individualized learning. So then I'm going to make a playlist or whatever it is to focus in on that goal. And I'm going to make sure that my pedagogy is up to date. So if I had things about individualizing learning in the classroom, I'm now in current state going to have to think about how am I individualizing learning remotely? And then what support am I going to provide to folks that are implementing this? So if we're using Microsoft Teams for individualizing learning, who do people call to get help with their password for Microsoft Teams versus who do people call to get pedagogical support for integrating with Microsoft Teams? So really short review of taking one piece of data and how you can take that through the cycle. Obviously, it's much more complicated and a lot more collaboration is needed, but just a base level example. Now, of course, do not sound like a salesperson because like I said, I am not compensated based on sales. I make no money or any bonuses or any additional money when you work with CDW. But just so you know, CDW does actually work with a plethora of PD partners, but this one specifically does have an online platform for PD that allows you to get that pedagogy PD, that content PD, that tech PD, the how-tos and the points and clicks of tech. It allows you to make playlists. It does a lot of the things that we talked about today. And of course, you know, there is a discount available right now. So yay, everybody loves a Black Friday discount, right? And then of course, one of the things that I think is important is it's thinking about how can you integrate this with what you already did and what's going to be the most helpful to you. Also, bonus with this one is they do actually have a parent portal that you can use for your parents as well. And they have, as you can see, lots of different courses across platform, across devices. So I feel like there's really something for everybody. In fact, I'm using this platform to learn more about Microsoft, since that is currently an ed tech gap in knowledge. And really the most important thing as we come to a close is prior to the pandemic, this would be a phrase that you would hear quite a bit. And for my content folks, you would hear, you know, instead of saying I'm not a techie, is I'm not good at math. I know even I would say that like about math. Or you would hear folks that saying like, you know, I'm not good at restorative justice or whatever, all these different things. But moving forward, post current state, post pandemic, you know, our teachers have had to do so many things that they've never done before. Same thing with our students. And I was a high school English teacher and I would do things with my kiddos and I'd talk about doing them with others. And they would look at me like I had two heads and they're like, oh, well, my kids can't do that. And I'm like, okay. You just don't believe that your kids can do that. But now we have kindergartners joining Zoom calls and doing work remotely. Your kids can do anything. We have teachers that never signed in to email prior to the pandemic, joining staff meetings remotely and teaching their kids remotely. We have this new foundation to move forward from. So how are we going to make sure when we go back to the classroom, we don't fall back on old practices? Because let's face it, we know that those old practices did not work for all kids. So how do we take what we've learned and move forward and weave it with content and pedagogy to make sure that our teachers are getting the best professional development and training humanly possible, and that our students are going to benefit from that. So again, just a quick reminder, I am Ari Flewelling, Ed Strategist with CDW. Please feel free to email, call, tweet, what have you. More than happy to be a resource for you. And as promised, this is the link to get to the feedback form. And when you fill out the feedback form, what's going to happen is actually right after this session, I'm going to log into my spreadsheet and turn on a mail merge. So that way you can get the copies of the slides. Also, by the way, if you didn't attend the other sessions from CDW, which was yesterday was one about esports, and concurrently happening with this one, there was one about strategies for hybrid learning, just fill out the form again, and then I'll send you those slides too. So feel free to do that. And super appreciate all of you being here. And I don't think I have anywhere else to be after this. Let me check my calendar, because if you have questions. Oh, it looks like Jack, you raised your hand. What's up?
Oh, I just wanted to let people know that I did the survey already. It's quite short and very easy to fill out. And so, I would encourage everybody to do that.
Uh-oh, says site can't be reached. Did I write my own link wrong? Let me double check. I hate when that happens. Oh, and just so you know, when I ask you for certain user information, I'm not going to spam your inbox. I'm not going to forward your information to somebody. It's literally just to get the slides. However, if you want follow-up information, you can let me know and I will send you a personalized email, not an email directly from the mail merge. So just know that you have that option as well. And yeah, I actually don't have another meeting until 12:30. So if anybody has questions or anything like that, I know the chat abouts are up next, and those are definitely a fantastic way to go get information from your peers and to see what's happening out in the field. So definitely go there. But if you have questions for me, I'm here for you.